Self-doubt can be a silent thief, robbing us of confidence and holding us back from living our best lives. Counseling psychologist Ashley Keita is here to share her insights and strategies to help us overcome self-doubt and embrace the journey of growth and empowerment. Such an important conversation. Yes, the weather outside is not agreeing with us. It's raining cats and dogs, but in here we can bring the positivity in. Let's jump right into it, Ashley. We're talking about self-doubt today. Can you briefly explain what that is and why we experience it as people?
Sure. So, contrary to popular belief, we're always having conversations with ourselves.
I do want to.
Definitely me too. And essentially, self-doubt is the voice in your head that's making you question your abilities, your decisions, and your worth. I like to think about it as an overly cautious friend. It's one of those friends that really loves you, has your best interest at heart, but often talks you down from trying new things, right? And the reason why we experience self-doubt is that our brain is kind of wired to really focus on protection.
Yes.
Rather than happiness.
Okay.
So your brain kind of is looking for threats. Now, back in the day, that would be a lion, and that would be a problem. Today's day, you're not so worried about a lion, but a threat can often be experienced as making a mistake or making a bad decision. So that's really where the self-doubt comes into play. It's trying to protect you from possible threats.
I love that analogy so much of it almost being an overprotective friend. You're screaming to me that you're an optimist, always able to put a positive spin on things. I love it for us. Now let's go down to the root causes. I mean, obviously there has to be something that triggers this negative belief of ourselves. What could some of those root causes be?
Sure, a lot of it comes from our experiences in terms of our upbringing. And really the environment that we are in. This can come down to parenting style, whether people were overly critical of us growing up, whether people had exceptionally high expectations of us that we felt that we couldn't meet, and then also kind of experiences that you've had throughout your lifespan. Past failures, maybe people constantly told you you couldn't do something. I know for myself, I was always told in my household that I was very good at maths.
Yes.
And very good at science.
Yes.
So I told myself that I can't do art.
Yes, I probably suck at everything else
I
if they
am
don't
not
talk about it.
creative and I am not athletic. And that was something that I constantly told myself, but it was just because of the messages that I internalized kind of growing up.
Okay. So that's useful to know the root causes, but can we go into how we identify them? I think I'm at a point where I am searching and learning about vulnerability and how to handle that with my own imposter syndrome. But I have been struggling with when it comes down to journaling and being honest with myself to identify what those root causes are. How can somebody go about doing that?
Sure, I think, like you say, vulnerability is a big thing. Being really honest and vulnerable with yourself is where it starts. You should probably play detective. And when it comes to playing detective, you're looking at different pieces of evidence to unpack the full picture. I like to start with understanding what are the situations that trigger self-doubt.
Okay.
And then CBT therapists have what we call the cognitive triangle. So at the top is your thoughts, then it's your emotions, and then your behaviors.
Okay.
So you understand the situations that trigger it. You then understand what are the thoughts that you think. Maybe it's things like, I'm not good enough, or I'm going to fail. From there, you understand how that makes you feel.
Yes.
And then, based on that, what are the consequences? What are the behaviors that you do linked to that fear and linked to that self-doubt? Why that is important is then you can also start to think about how do you break those down using that triangle. And for me, I find that a very powerful tool to unpack.
It really does sound like it, because I think a lot of journal articles will tell us have a conversation with yourself. But with this three-way step that you can take, it almost walks you through a realistic way of coming to that conclusion.
Sure.
And I mean, failure is a part of life. We can't pretend that it's not a thing. How do we incorporate accepting failure and bringing down that voice of self-doubt that we have in our ears?
Sure, I think we all know realistically that failure is a part of life. I think the difference is that some people will frame it as, I have failed.
Yes.
And this is something that I can learn from. Whereas other people will kind of internalize it as, I am a failure. And that is a lot more harsher way of thinking about things because it goes straight to the core of your worth. So really being able to distinguish between I have failed or I've made a mistake and I am a failure becomes really key to how we manage failure.
Oh, no, I absolutely love that. And I think it needs to be reiterated more than ever, especially in this day and age. And I just want to quickly touch up on the fact that we all have different and varying levels of experiencing struggling. Rain or shine, even though it's raining today, we all have our experiences where we have some kind of self-doubt in the back of our minds.
Sure.
Why is it that some people experience it for a lot longer than others?
So again, it comes to your whole life experience, but also personality factors. Some people's self-doubt is a little bit louder than others, and we call it that inner critic. For me, I think it's always helpful to work on that inner critic, to understand how loud that inner critic really is, and to give your inner critic a name. My inner critic is called Anxious Ash.
Love it because it rhymes.
Right, she's the girl she thinks she is. She is loud, she screams, she's dramatic, and she always speaks worst case scenario. Now, getting to know Anxious Ash has been a very big part of me working on my self-doubt and my inner critic, so that I can make a distinction when I'm thinking or feeling something. Is it Anxious Ash, or is it realistically what is happening and a kind of more objective, realistic thought? And I think that that's really powerful to understand whether that voice is Anxious Ash and her fearful tendencies, or whether there is something else that's going on, something, evidence that tells you something against that or challenges that, becomes really important for everyone.
Oh, I appreciate that so much, because we need to know the difference between the narrative we are telling ourselves and the narrative that actually exists.
Sure.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Ashley. Very much needed, and I'm going to use these tips in my own life.
Perfect.
And remember that self-doubt does not define you. Your courage to grow does. Later, Ashley will be back to share her tips on how to cultivate a more positive you. But stay tuned, because after the break, we chat to Grammy award-winning superstar Nomcebo Zikode.